schon sagen.
Recording in progress.
Guten Abend, herzlich willkommen im Depot. Welcome to Depot. Welcome to the book presentation of Changing Spatial Practices. Thank you so much for organizing this event, and so nice to have so many people here on a Friday night. Those architects work a lot, we know that. And they are still up for a new book, and it's about alliances, activism, and networks. My name is Sarah van Dordrecht. I'm the director of Depot. And I just wanted to tell you that we're recording and streaming this event, so only the podium is recorded. But if you say something in the microphone later, your voice will be recorded, just to let you know. If you don't want it, please give me a sign. And I'll hand the microphone to Bernadette Krejs. Thank you so much for the great cooperation, and I wish you and us a great evening.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for having us here at the wonderful Depot, and thank you all for joining us. For us, it's really a little celebration. Working on a book, you may know, needs a lot of time, care work, editing, and I think we started nearly 2 years ago with our call, and now it's really we did a release 2 days ago at your school in the University of Kassel, and now here in Vienna. So we are very happy to celebrate and to enjoy this evening together with you. As you can see here, the book has the title Changing Spatial Practices, Alliances, Activism and Networks. This is a cooperation with, or it's part of the series of Dimension, Journal for Architecture Knowledge, which has been developed at TU München, and we are the 8th volume of this series. Yeah, we are happy that this book is finally coming to an end and that we can present it today. So we will give you a bit of an introduction, what we as editors did, and then today is really the focus also on the authors who did this book or who wrote the articles. Some of them are here in person. We are very happy that you joined us here at Depot Wien. And the others are here in Zoom joining us. So they will all give us a short input, just what they wrote about and how they connected their research to the topic of changing spatial practices. And after that, we would be very happy if you could join the discussion, if there are some questions from your side, or there are also questions from our side when we work on this topic, changing spatial practices. I'm always talking about we, who are we, and I want very briefly, before we switch to the content of the book, introduce the group of great women here on the podium. First of all, I want to thank you, Isabel Glogar, who was the first one who initiated this project and gave some of us a call, and then it went on, and we finally had this great group of editors here, so thank you, Isabel. Isabel is a researcher at urban design at the TU München, and she has also her own practice off-house about housing and urban design or urban strategies. Then we have here a guest from really very, very far away from New York City, Kadambari Baxi. We are so happy that you had this long journey coming to us and celebrating and presenting this book today. Kadambari is a professor at Bernard College, Columbia University in New York, and you gave a wonderful lecture this week at TU Wien and then in Kassel, introducing your amazing work about justice, reproductive labor, climate questions. So follow the work of Kadambari Baxi, it's quite amazing. Then we have Tatjana Schneider, who also joined us from Germany, TU Braunschweig, where you are the professor of the Institute for Theory of the Architecture and the City. I don't really get it in detail, but if there are students here, and I see someone really joined TU Braunschweig, it's amazing which kind of formats you developed in engaging with other forms of learning and knowledge production. So I think it's really very extraordinary how you see education at your institute. And there's an Erasmus exchange program. And I mean, maybe also to say, you're also part of MOLD, which where you had a book release last week as well. Climate architecture is climate, so this is something which is also very near to you, I would say. And of course, Gabu Heindl, I think everybody from Vienna knows her. Gabu Heindl is professor in Kassel at the Department for Architecture and Economy and the Cities. It was wonderful when we saw your department 2 days ago, and we had a wonderful book release there as well. Gabu has also her own practice, Gabu Heindl Architektur, and I think you're all familiar with the great projects in housing and other fields you are doing. My name is Bernadette Krejs. I'm teaching or practicing at the Technical University in Vienna at the Department for Housing and Design. I'm also part of the Claiming Spaces Collective, which is a feminist collective we founded some couple of years ago. And I'm also part of Palace of Unlearning, which is, we call it an activist research practice. I was very happy to be part of this enormous great group of researchers, scholars, practitioners, and I'm very happy that we did this book together, and we wanted to give you today some insights into the book. And I think the next person I will hand on is Katharina, who is part of the so-called chief editors of Dimensions. That's the group who founded Dimensions and did already eight magazines in this series, and Katharina will say or share some words from the editor's side with us. So hopefully our technical support system here, which is Zoom and YouTube, etc. We are live on YouTube, people. So Katharina, I would like to, it would be wonderful if you could join us here, and hopefully we can hear you. I maybe stop my screen sharing, then maybe we can see you better.
Hello, and warm greetings to everyone in Wien and everyone who is joining from all over the world. This, to me, is a wonderful opportunity. I would have loved to be with you in Vienna today, but speaking of activism, due to the general strike in Italy, I couldn't make it. And so, yes, I'm reaching out to you with the greatest thanks from my personal side, but also on behalf of the entire lead editorial team. And these thanks go first and foremost to all these wonderful women on the podium for bringing up the topic that you investigated, creating and holding this framework over the long period of time that it took for this journal to come into being. And then it goes to each and every person who contributed their perspectives and their work to the journal. And also to hands-on, I would like to namely thank Victoria Fricka and my fellow colleague Lumi Kirk, who did the final touches on the editing and making and becoming of this journal. So you see, it's a stretch of people from different realms involved. And I think, yeah, looking at networks, looking at alliances, looking at coming together, this was the intention behind the journal. And I'm incredibly grateful how over the past 4 years this journal has grown such a great community of people and contributors. And for everyone interested in the future, I would just shortly want to share with you that there is an open call happening at the moment. Again, we are working all our way towards the next issue, so feel free to look at the website and to become engaged with this group of people. But today it is supposed to be around this very issue that has come into being. And yeah, I would very much like to say that the work that goes into a journal always comes from the people who individually contribute to that. It's a lot of work, it's a lot of communication. And I think the beauty of moments like tonight is the gratification in bringing people together and joining in the same space and beyond the same space virtually. to connect to the topic that you created. And therefore, yeah, best wishes and greatest thanks to everyone on this team and in this copy. Thank you.
Thank you, Katharina. Thank you also, also Uta Graf and Ferdinand Ludwig, that are also part of the lead editors of this issue, and Technical University Munich. I have also, I took over also to thank everybody involved. So first of all, I have to thank the authors that are online and here present, that we will have later on, really introducing also their contributions, that without it would not be possible to have this wonderful collaboration also. And we also would like to thank the depot that we have the possibility to be here in this space that hosted so many discussions already. And we also thank our institutions, of course. We are all part of different institutions, as you heard, as they also were supporting the issue financially, of course, in some way. And we especially have to thank again Victoria Fricka, that also helped us really with the layout and putting it together. So really thank you, Vicky, for all your work, and really have to say thank you. And as you see, I'm sure I forgot somebody, but the reviewers, yes, thank you so much. These were the most important people, really the wonderful reviewers that took their time, and that without them it wouldn't have been possible to have this issue. And they have really also the expertise in the issue and on the theme that we are discussing today, because there are so many, and that's already the our question that I would like to introduce to you, that the changing spatial practices are diverse voices, and the reviewers that took the time to take part in this issue, they all work in this field, so they are really experts and specialists, and we really have to thank them that they took their time. And so really thank you as well to them. Coming to why we are doing the issue, I'm really grateful that we have the chance and that we came together, the 5 of us, really coming from different fields, coming from different institutions. We are all educators, researchers, and practitioners. We are working in the field of spatial practices, and we encountered in our research, in our work in universities, in education, but also in our practices, that architecture still is often centered around consumption of resources and an extractive practice. And on the other hand, we have emerging practices, spatial practices, that really tackle and show us different paths how architecture can lead to a more just spatial practice. And for us, it was really important to encourage and feature in this discussion just spatial practices, and also especially center around feminist spatial practices. And we have like 15 contributions in this issue, but there are much more, of course, practices that show us this path, and we are only initiating this discussion, so see this also as a really ongoing process that we want to open up, and that is, we will also continue, but we also hope you continue this path. And we are all part of this, the work on spatial practices, and Yes, I will hand over to Gabu that also, yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, we are now going to give just a brief overview of why we are calling this book Changing Spatial Practices, Alliances, Activism and Networks. And first of all, we wanted to say that alliances can be co-opted, activism can serve also reactionary goals, and networks can just as well entrench inequality as dismantle it, and this is why we need to position ourselves. And I think that's really what we want to also make very clear, and did make very clear in the beginning, hopefully with our introduction and also with our call for papers, to say, yes, we do believe changing spatial practices are obviously highly political, and in this sense, we need to also make sure that we know who we and why and what we are working on in terms of alliances, activism, and networks. And I'm going to start on alliances, as the first section of this book addresses these questions. How can architecture participate in building alliances? How can it enter co-working with unexpected partners? What makes an alliance? Political theory defines alliances as collective actions of groups that don't lose their identity in the cooperation, which is not based on habitual sameness of interests or similarity of habitus, but serves a temporal strategic goal. Alliances do not come natural. They have to be built, either around moral altruism, which makes one group take a stance for another one, or, quite differently, around a shared project goal, which can be a common goal, but also a common enemy. More soberly explained by use of the chain of equivalence concept within hegemonic political theory, a big difference to a shared external adversary can level and relativize smaller interior differences between groups or interests entering into an alliance. We encounter such alliances in many cases, of course, with neither only left or radical democratic projects, nor exclusively with anti-hegemonic projects. Examples include alliances between architects and other spatial practitioners, climate institutions, activists, politicians, government bodies, entrepreneurs, and academia, as well as wider society to address climate breakdown through new policies, just building practices and processes that put an end to extractivist ways of doing. Hence, alliances compel us to attend equally to the what of political action as to the how, the process, the composition, the labor of building coalition structures. As a form of co-working, and you will see that we are centering this book, of course, also around work, and we are declaring these alliances maybe as co-working. Alliances allow actors to contribute specific expertise, tactics, and forms of knowledge toward a shared undertaking. The alliance then becomes a space where contradiction is not eliminated, but negotiated. To become an ally architect requires more than ethical positioning. It demands structural realignment. It requires seeing architecture not as an end in itself, but as part of broader social and political struggles.
Hello, everyone. So I'm going to talk a bit about the next section, which is activism. Activism activates new trajectories of change. It often promotes collective actions that aim to disrupt or change existing paradigms. Eager to explore the potential of activism in our field at large, our call invited views on what activism might mean today or make possible today. We sought activist practices that integrated not just mild resistance against certain hegemonic influences, but also offered proactive and projective actions. The contributions we received begin to outline some possibilities, and I would like to add that you all are here in this room, I hope, to continue to think about how you might expand these possibilities. So I'd encourage everyone to look at all these contributions and the connected sections. They're in the book, but we'll talk about the open access PDF that will be available also soon. And this section, I'd just like to end with the last paragraph in this section here. To bring about the necessary change in architectural practice today, insurgent, interconnected, and organized activism is essential. To steer spatial practices towards inclusive climate, social, and political ecosystems, unlearning, relearning, and co-learning is required by one and all. No one tactic, method, or solution is sufficient on its own. Scaling up and speeding up any and all actions is increasingly evident. However, change is a process. It's inherently slow and often incremental. When enacted through planned actions, plural or molecular, collective and organized, it can lead to genuine transformation.
So the final part of the book deals with networks. How do we understand networks? Networks we understand as a particular form of mesh or web or of different types and forms of organizations, which can be human or non-human. They can be more or less structured, more or less connected, or more or less defined. Yet they're always constructs that share issues of concern. They are threaded and interwoven accumulations and tangles of allies, which is now where you already see maybe also the difficulty of having these three categories, because they're not mutually exclusive, but very often they're overlapping and they're building upon each other as well. And I think we're hearing some of that also in the presentations. But they are held together by thoughts, ideas, and actions, sharing not necessarily a common goal, but an idea of direction. And that is also really quite beautiful, now that you have some idea in mind of where you want to go, but maybe not necessarily how you want to get there. And these ideas of direction, they can be environmental justice, they could be about ecological solidarity, the deflation of persisting myth of modernity or patriarchal strongholds, or the shattering of dominant narratives of heroes and heroines. And instead, they become tools of resistance, trapping mechanisms, instruments of solidarity, comfort blankets, powerful vehicles, beautiful, repairable, soft landings, catchers and keepers of dreams, and anything but made of rigid hierarchies. To make the net of the network is work. It's in the word itself, network. Recognizing work, so labor, as a constituent part of the network, it becomes clear that making that net is as much about those who forged the connections between nodes as it is about the connections and relations between them, which have to be tended to, maintained, and cared for. I continue? Yeah? Okay, good. So the big question here is, we talked about the division of labor, obviously, very much in the beginning. The big question here is also then about who is doing the work? Are we doing the work? And of course, that leads us to Audre Lorde, whose seminal question, you could almost say by now, are we doing the work? Has been a guiding lens also for our work on the publication, but also it's important to look at what the work is that is being done and how it is being done. So it's not just about are we doing it, but which work are we doing and how is that work coming together. A radical rethinking of the network as network, as I was just saying, of alliances as co-work and activism as counter-work accompanies the wider radical rethinking of ethics, politics, and kinship in times of stubbornly persisting narratives of mastery and control. So the contributions, and we'll go to the contributions in a minute, we understand them, or we talk about them as offerings that differ in strategies, stories, and actions. Yet they form powerful connections despite an existing racist, extractive, and patriarchal architecture that seeks to keep us separated. They compellingly demonstrate ways of sharing knowledge and caring for one another, attending to our histories, while also providing feminist imaginaries and imaginations that make space for other stories, other bodies, other spaces. We end here, but the work, of course, is not done. No? It goes on and on and on. And we leave the work open to us all, to a diversity of forms of collaborations to continue the path towards just, joyful, empowering, and non-extractive architectural practices.
So even if this is much to get a dense text read by someone, but I think very beautiful voices, I think the introduction is some kind of a framework for the amazing articles which follow then and which are really going deeper into very different topics. And I think we all agreed on that it's not a compendium which is finished. And I think that's what you said, it's that we keep all going, working on these topics. And we are really super happy that we have some of the authors now here who will join our discussion, and we have, I think, six very short contributions. And we will start with the first chapter, which is alliances. And it would be very nice, Karin, because you're here in person, if you could join us here on the podium. And there is also a second speaker here in Zoom. This is Alina. I will stop the screen sharing. Alina, hello, can you hear us? Maybe you...
We are four speakers in total or less, because Husu is already here on Zoom.
So we have Alina, and we have Diego and Camilo, yes, and Karin here, yes. So thank you, welcome.
Should I start? Okay. We just have these slides as sort of visual cues, and we will try to be very, very fast. So yeah, thank you so much to the editors, of course, for the opportunity for having us tonight and in the book. So the context of our collective text is the 11th edition of the International Architecture Biennale Rotterdam, which was titled Nature of Hope and took place in 2024. We were a group of 5 curators, so Jenna Bijsblik, Katarina Kukuk, Hani Sali, Norki Lenin, and me. And the goal of this Biennale was really to amplify spatial and artistic practices that worked through ecological positions. Understanding this could take different meanings. This Biennale was very practice-oriented, and we wanted to prioritize architects that were engaged and implicated in different forms of alliance. And the idea of becoming an ally to others, particularly those who have been historically marginalized from the architecture discipline, was transversal to a lot of the work we curated, but the practices in the Biennale were not framed in these terms primarily. So I really thought this conversation could go further. And it was then that the opportunity to write a collective text for this edited publication presented itself, and I invited 4 Nature of Hope participants to write together. So there are Husus who are here. They work between Colombia and Spain and have a practice that is simultaneously ecological, decolonial, multi-species, and non-heteronormative. There's also Public Works, which is a British not-for-profit design practice working for social and ecological transformation by being really embedded in the communities they work with. Karin, who is also here, is a researcher based in Vienna, responding to extractive violence in indigenous territory in Sweden through prisms of archiving, organizing, and feminist ethics. And also Liz-Marie Gurak-Hjortfors, who is a Lule Sami ethnology and researcher who works to keep Sami memory and culture alive. And this text had different moments of growth and revision. It started with me posing reflections and prompts as jump-off points for the other authors to develop their own positions. And in this short presentation, we will quickly rehearse this with the co-authors that are present. So first, I will go to Karin with this question. Karin, in our text, you talk about acknowledging your own privileges and reliance on extraction while working with the women of Gällivare. you acknowledge that there are forms of violence that they experience that you do not, but that you also try to make your practice responsible to them. So could you please talk about finding ways of working together and remaining accountable to others?
Yeah, thank you so much, Alina, for this question, which I actually tackled together with my colleague, ally, friend, co-researcher, Lise Marie Gorak-Hjortfors, and she's a Lule Sami ethnologist, and we've been collaborating since 2016, where we first met in a mining town above the polar circle in Sweden. But the place is also the land of the indigenous Sami people. And I started collaborating with local practitioners from Malmberget. At this time I was living in Sweden. It's a mining town which is disappearing due to the extraction of iron ore deep under the ground. So as architects, I would say we are also materially related to these places, and we're building with the material from these areas. And I wondered if across these positions and situatedness, can we still work together with our different vulnerabilities, different situated knowledges and different practices, and how can we work together? And I'm very privileged to collaborate with local practitioners from this mining town, from Malmberget and Gällivare, and they are working in the fields of arts, pedagogies, and knowledge production. And it has been a long-term collaboration since 2016, which also deeply changed my practice as researcher and architect by making it accountable to the local practitioners. This exhibition was that Alina introduced was a great moment also for us to share some video conversations which showed 4 different positions from the area. That is with Pernilla Fagerlund, who curated a farewell festival for the last remaining high-rise building of the mining town, Miriam Wickman, who walks paths of her ancestors in threatened woods, Karina Jarret, who founded an embroidery cafe with women who embroider architectures before they were going to be dismantled, and Lise Marie Gorak-Hjortfors, the Lule Sami ethnologist who claims back the Sami heritage of the area that Alina mentioned first. So she works with knowledge production, so she writes, she publishes books, she works as a pedagogue, and she writes also poems, and is also very involved in the political work of the Sami people. And she calls her work soft activism, which is mostly about making the Sami culture visible, which this exhibition and also this publication is a great opportunity for us. We met in 2016 when I invited Lise Marie about the absence of the Sami voices in the historiography of the disappearing mining town. And since then we have come together from time to time and meet in collaborations and complementary practices with shared aims. Yeah, that's from our side, Alina.
Thank you. Yeah, and now as Kusov, so in our text, you speak about how forging alliances as well as looking for sources of knowledge and wisdom outside of the European canon helped you reflect on your own experiences with epistemic violence and exclusion as Colombian migrants in Europe. So could you, maybe talk about how these practices have caused you to change as individuals and practitioners?
Hello everybody, and thank you Alina for the invitation, and thanks to all of our co-authors and other colleagues and thinkers who help us develop the projects and ideas discussed in the article. Our gratitude also goes to the editors and makers of Dimensions and everyone who made this gathering possible, including also the cleaning and maintenance staff in Vienna, and those elsewhere sustaining the digital infrastructures we are using right now. In general, all the people whose work is essential, even if too often rendered invisible. At USOS, we try to imagine what we call interwoven architectures, which is ways of making space and designing it, which is our focus, that connect struggles for social justice around, for example, gender, race, class, or the rights of other sentient beings with planetary care. And to your question, Alina, building alliances with others who, like us, inhabit different margins, especially outside the epistemic margins of the global north, has been transformative. Through projects, collaborations, and friendships, these alliances have helped us recognize at a personal level and professional level as well several of our own vulnerabilities and privileges as structural. And this has definitely changed our practice. First, it has taught us that colonial dynamics of north-south epistemic extractivism and erasure can only be faced collectively. Secondly, it has also encouraged us to embrace non-Western centric ways of knowing and being that are often undervalued. And third, it has also pushed us to think of architecture as a space where we can try other ways of being together, including with other species, with more attention to power asymmetries. So we can perhaps build a we that is maybe more just, more joyful as well, and aligned with material forms of counter-extractivism in the face of the current ecological crisis. Thank you, and looking forward to reading the entire content of the book. We're very happy to be with all of you.
Thank you, everyone. That was our presentation.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Hey, thank you very much for joining via Zoom, and also I know the quality is not the best of the sound, but I think it's so great that we have all the people here in the room joining us from Bogota and from everywhere, and Karin here live in person. And I think it's the article in the first chapter, Becoming Architects as Ally, and I think you have all now some books in your hands, so going deeper into it and is provided in the text. And thank you very much to all of you, Karin, Alina, and for giving us these glimpses into your article. We have another contribution from this section, and I'm very happy that Lydia is here from Bratislava. Thank you for joining us tonight, coming to Vienna to be with us. You wrote the article, Staying with the Trouble, Feminist Spatial Practices and Hybrid Agencies in Slovakia and the Czech Republic. And I will also share your PDF with us, and you could give us some insights into your article.
Yes, thank you very much. I arrived today from Bratislava, and I'm very happy that all of you arrived. I am a sociologist that is based in Slovak Academy of Sciences, but also at Spolka, which is a Slovak non-profit studio of architecture and sociology. And that's important to state it here because the research and the data I present in the chapter in the second or in the first part of the book is drawing from the practice of Spolka, and started actually 5 years ago when me and my colleague Zuzana Tabačková, who is an architect, wanted to research more about spatial practice in Slovak and in Czech context, because Spolka is a studio that is focused more on projects of spatial justice, housing unaffordability, climate resilience, and we already exist for around 10 years, but we found out in time that a lot of knowledge on spatial practice is based in global north or global west and was not really fitting our context and our experience. So we wanted to find out more about what is the experience like for other actors in our context, and whether it brings something maybe more or innovative or can be found there, and why to even look there if we were from other sides of the world, so in the opposite side. Because we are a non-profit studio, we focus on marginalized perspectives. So we started this research with Susanna in 2021, snowballing contacts from our friends that I also see here today, asking them if they know collectives like us who deal with feminist spatial practice in our context to give us contacts. And together we sampled around 250 collectives, organizations, alliances, activist groups, studios, and in the end we interviewed 21 of them. So I will just briefly tell you or show you a window to Slovak and Czech feminist spatial practice. My goal in this chapter was twofold. First, to bring these practices into local discourses and strengthen the voices they bring into formal planning by writing about them and naming them. But it was also to show how this special approach of local organizations working in this field develop and how it can contribute to changing spatial practices elsewhere at a time when social, environmental, housing, economic, and other crises intersect. So after in the field research, we talked with 21 spatial organizations. We also collected a lot of materials about them. What they had in common was that they brought forward different perspectives that were marginalized in our planning. For example, perspectives of Roma communities, long-term unemployed women, families lacking home, natural actors even like pollinators, bats, or people who walk and use bicycle rather than cars. And some of them wouldn't call their practice really feminist, yet their work was somehow guided by feminist values like care, solidarity, anti-capitalism, plurality. And to understand their work, I drew from feminism for the 99% manifesto, but also from Donna Haraway's concepts of hybridity and fluidity, and they helped me describe the ways in which they work with these dominant neoliberal narratives of today's society that is so focused on growth, efficiency, and so on. And what I found out in the field is that these practices often draw strongly from situatedness, and they are trying to collect data, which we don't usually have in Czechoslovak context a lot. They also strongly work with storytelling and creating positive images, and they also, most of them were working with specific location and staying with the specific locations of their practice. And since they are not such perfect examples of something we call feminist planning, but they operate with limited resources in systems that are designed not to support them in a very unique way. And I argue that this is precisely this position that makes their cases so interesting, because for example, when we look at one of the organizations, if we can click it, which is called Čierne diery, it's called black holes exactly because it works in one of the regions in Slovakia that is often described by politicians as like there is nothing there, although there is obviously a lot of there. And this is the organization where our architects, but also designers, graphic designers, PR communicators, and they blend what is currently trending in a status quo with new ways of how to operate in the field that is very neoliberal. They create stories about abandoned modernist heritage, about abandoned modernist buildings, and they are creating interesting books and graphics that are so popular currently in Slovakia that are usually sold out the day they are published. And by this way, they fund their other activities. For example, they have social network, they're employed long-term unemployed Roma women, they help other NGOs to, for example, repair or reconstruct old modernist heritage. So in this way, they work within the neoliberal system, but they are creating hybrid strategies in order for them to survive in Slovakia, where currently there is a huge fight against NGOs. So this hybridity and fluidity is some new form of relationality, which I think could help in the times of crisis, because they demonstrate that care, hybridity, and staying with the trouble are not just abstract concepts, but concrete practice tools for transforming how we can design, plan, and adapt in the times of crisis. So that's in short. Thank you.
So we have, this was from the chapter 2, wonderful contributions from the chapter Alliances. We will now come to the chapter of activism. Only you all have now books almost, so there are alliances. We also have 2 other contributions that are super interesting and very also specific, and it encourage you also to read into it. And we have the possibility of the open essays book as well, so later on also for everybody that is online, but here you can always have also you can read the open essays book, and please also have a look at the 2 other contributions that are very important and crucial, and as one is also on reproductive justice, that is a central theme, and today we had Kadambari, you had also this wonderful lecture also on this theme. So now we are coming to activism, and what is alliances, activism, and networks binding together. Maybe also our central question also regarding changing spatial practices is that collaboration is central, and collaboration is central in activism networks as well. And now we are coming to activism, and I'm very happy that Amel Breuel is today with us. She, so I will now switch to Amel, and she will talk about her contribution, Architects as Climate Activists.
Sorry, just a second. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, I just realized I didn't have the mic on. Yes. Hi everyone. Thank you so much for inviting tonight, and also in the publication, and thank you for the patience during the last 2 years. It was the first time I was writing a peer review article. So I'm Amel, as I said, an architect and climate activist, and in my article I chosen to study architecture as a way to change the world around me, because it's why I jumped into architecture. And I realized a bit later that architecture was also part of the problem. And in 2018, after traveling and dreaming about quitting the profession, I actually joined Extinction Rebellion and met amazing people there, some that were activists before, some that weren't. And even more interesting for me, I met architects there, and several engaged architects I know today are disillusioned about the situation, and maybe would rather quit quietly or as an activist act, say it's enough, the building industry. But yes, some do stay, and I was curious to kind of map out who's staying and who's fighting both as an activist and an architect. So I choose to interview 3 activist architects to understand how they respond effectively to crisis, fostering collective action and planetary care. Because I wanted to show that it's possible to keep the 2 hats, be an architect while being an activist, even though I'm very aware that it might be a privileged point of view. So the 2 first people I interviewed are actually having their own practice, so it's a bit easier. And the last one was employed when she studied activism, and now is also doing her own practice. So it's still difficult to be employed and activist, but I believe it's possible to be architect and activist. So the first person I interviewed was Nick Newman, that is behind Studio Bark and Ubilt. And interesting enough, he developed, or like with other activists, they developed system with the U-Built project, that is a system, modular system for example, tiny houses to bigger houses into a barricade. And he actually got, it became very important because it was at the XR protest in 2019, and it was a crackdown by the police on the warehouse where all the equipment was. So the only remaining elements were the U-Built elements, and Nick stamped in one of them Trafalgar Square and then got arrested. And it was quite photogenic, so it was even in the zine, in different newspaper, and as is explained, there was two ways of reacting: either shy away from it, or cover it up, or own it. And I think it's very interesting when architects decide to own it. And so he also researched in a book called Protest Architecture, Structures of Civil Resistance, that architecture has the power to elevate a protest, to improve the safety, for example, the visibility, effectiveness of protests, and so on. What is also interesting is that Studio Bark working mode is an alternative to the current mainstream scheme of the architecture offices. So they take some of it in their office. For example, they have a free day every other week. They close on climate strikes to encourage their employees to join the strikes. Tom Bennett is also at Studio Bark, and it was the second interview. I met him while I was international coordinator for the Architect Climate Action Network. So as you said, it's very many links between activism and alliances and network. Maybe ACAN is kind of the pinnacle of this. And he, not like Newman, he had been already activist from university, and he was part of Designing Action. And one thing that was really interesting, I think, was that he decided when he was arrested as well to actually claim it and reclaim it and go to the ARB, because there is something called like he was kind of convicted under the Public Order Act of the UK. And instead of hiding it, he decided to boldly go to the Architect Registration Board and sending out a letter of resignation saying, like, I cannot be architects according to the ARB. And that led the ARB to actually publicly say that it was great to both be an activist, to do civil disobedience, and be at the ARB. And so ACAN is really this idea of, instead of feeling alone and powerless, that we can all ally and fight the biggest things in the industry, which is very relevant. And in the Studio Bark, I forgot to mention, there is also the engineer Morgan Trollen that spent a year in jail after climbing a bridge for Just Stop Oil. So again, it's a very engaged office. While Lea Otson was another interesting case, as she's been employed and tried to encourage her whole office to go to the protest of Extinction Rebellion when she was part of them. Especially, she was key into setting the light on the building industry. It's a lot about fossil fuel in climate activism, but thanks to her, it became very apparent what the building industry is doing, 40% of the CO2 emissions, as we know. So as it became very hard for her to be both an activist in the weekend and in the evenings and an architect during the day, she actually quit. And after joining Extinction Rebellion, she joined the Uprising of the Earth, that is considered radical. She had even the police going down at her place and was in custody for 3 days. So it's really someone that is taking the fight, but she also does quite a lot of great architecture. I don't have pictures now. This is actually from that action that also was on site, but also analyzing where the concrete was going from in the sand. So it was multiple points of action as well. And all of that led her to pause in her activism and actually write a book against concrete. And her architecture is a lot about existing buildings, taking care of refugees in the region she's living in, and building for association. And she talks a lot about the economical issue of that situation. So as a conclusion, the future of architecture for me lies in a subtle mix of being able to voice out against the struggle of the industry, to broaden our understanding of architecture, from rehabilitation to adopting regenerative approaches and new working modes, I definitely believe we need more architects in the future, maybe not for new buildings, but for many other things. But we also need transformation on the economy and legal framework, and for that I believe we need architects, activists. And there is a lot of grassroots initiatives at the moment that is possible to join. There is educational reform that is also vital for preparing future architects. And I think ultimately the reimagination of architecture as a force for social and ecological justice is needed, and the narrative from profit-driven and aesthetical focuses output to equity, care, and resilience. So I will stop here on a quote of Angela Davis, which I feel is very powerful and has been with me since she came to Oslo, actually where I'm based, to talk, who says, "I am no longer accepting the things I cannot change. I am changing the things I cannot accept."
Thank you, Amel. So we are coming now to ZAS, and it's a collective from Zurich, from Switzerland, and we have today Ella Esslinger and Blanca Mayor today here from the collective, and thank you for being here, and I cannot see you, but I give the word to you. So yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello. So hi everyone, thanks a lot for the opportunity to share our contribution. As you said, we're both here on behalf of ZAS, the Zürcher Arbeitsgruppe für Städtebau, so the Zurich Working Group for Urbanism. My name is Blanca Mayer, and I practice as an architect, and I also teach at ETH.
Hi everyone, my name is Ella Esslinger. I was living in Zurich, now I'm currently a PhD student in architectural history and theory at Princeton. And we will briefly present our article, which is titled Counter-Proposals in Zurich, Constructive Criticism of Destructive Practices by ZAS and their accomplices. And for this article, we worked together with Milena Buchweider, Sonja Fluri, Jens Knöpfel, and Megan Rubin. And yeah, first as a context, in 1959, a group of architects in Zurich began to organize themselves into an association called ZAS, Zürcher Arbeitsgruppe für Städtebau, Zurich Working Group for Urbanism. The group, which stayed active until the late 1980s, consisted of figures such as Fritz Schwarz, Beate Schnitter, Manuel Pauli, and Eduard Neunschwander. And ZAS always acted with a clear political stance, never just by opposing, but by making constructive counter-proposals, and especially in reaction to demolition projects within the city of Zurich. In 2021, ZAS, this time with an asterisk at the end of the name, was formed as a reactivation of ZAS. And in the last 4 years, as ZAS, we developed different strategies to enter the processes of political decision-making on urban transformation. Blanca, do you want to change the slide? And yeah, the counter-proposals from ZAS and our accomplices presented in this article show that when architects combine their professional and civic agency, they can directly shape the material and political conditions of democratic practice in the built environment, and especially in the context of the Swiss context of direct democracy, such interventions have the potential to transform both spatial planning and urban life. Through collaborative design, speculative practice, and civic engagement, we aim to reposition architectural work as a means of resistance and transformation. And in times of ecological urgency and social fragmentation, the counter-proposal is not merely an act of opposition, it's an essential instrument for reimagining and reclaiming the future of our cities.
So in our paper, we look at Zurich, where the push for inward urban growth has fueled widespread demolition and replacement construction, eliminating affordable homes and reshaping the city's built fabric. And we are interested in how counter-proposals, typically emerging from activists and grassroots networks, do not only challenge demolition practices, but proactively propose alternative spatial practices. So our text has mainly 3 chapters. Under reprogramming, the first one, to explore how the former Zürcher Arbeitsgruppe für Städtebau occupied the city's historic butcher's market building, the Fleischhalle, in the 1960s to protest its planned demolition and spark public dialogue. Anticipating looks at the 1970s struggle over a collection of historic residential and commercial buildings at Helmutstraße, where inhabitants, activists, and architects collaborated to halt the building's destruction. Finally, in this section, Speculating, we reflect on our own recent actions as architects and citizens to challenge the planned demolition of Zurich's Trili Towers, where we initiated a speculative idea competition to gather multiple counter-proposals to the tower's destruction. Our interest in the three counter-proposals presented from a spontaneous reuse project to a political initiative did not begin as an academic pursuit. Instead, we encountered these projects through our own activist engagement, discovering them in archives, in media reports, or from our peers. By analyzing the organizational strategies, media, and outcomes of these counter-proposal movements, we aim to better understand and document their political and architectural significance, and speculate how such initiatives might continue to shape urban futures today. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. And I hand over to...
Thank you very much, Sas, for sharing that with us. I know maybe there are already some questions, but I think we will take the last two inputs and then we will collectively can go into a discussion and discuss further things. So the last chapter is networks, and we will go on with the article Spatial Activist Research as Embodied Practice. It was written by a collective, and I think Ezra is joining us for this article. Ezra, are you here?
Yes, I am.
Super. We can hear you. So please, the display is yours.
Can you see my slides as well?
Yes, perfect.
Perfect. Okay, great. Thank you. And thank you, Kadambari, Isabel, Gabu, Bernadette, and Tatjana, and congratulations on this timely publication. It gave voice to a rich constellation of questions and situated experiences, it seems. I'm truly inspired by all the presentations. I'm Dr. Esra Can. I'm an activist architect. I'm proud of calling myself activist. I'm an activist architect, researcher, and educator at Sheffield School of Architecture and Landscape. I contributed to this publication as part of the Lines of Light research group. You can find more about the group on our WordPress page, which is an open archive of documenting our events and activities. Our paper is grounded in a collective voice reflecting on what it means to be an activist researcher and how engaging with embodied knowledge production reshapes how we think about and perform spatial practice. With my co-authors Maria, Andrew, Jacqueline, Lara, and Doina, who supervised us all as PhD students previously, we situate our contribution within an interconnected critique of global crisis, calling for different ways of producing the knowledges that inform our spatial thinking. Our central question is what the embodied knowledges that emerge from activist research bring to spatial practice. We take a feminist and decolonial lens on architectural knowledge production and outline a shared approach we call embodied praxis, a mode of reflexive knowledge production embedded in emancipatory social-spatial action, specially observed within marginalized or peripheral contexts where the experiences of polycrisis is amplified. Our paper centers on lived experiences at the intersections of architecture, research, and activism, articulated mainly through 4 spatial activist research narratives that we share in the publication. First, Mekana, an interstitial movement resisting and rebuilding within constraining context in Amman, Jordan, a narrative by Jacqueline Al-Dalala. And the image here shows a workshop within the domestic environment of Mekana with grassroots organizations and local communities. Second, civic co-learning as a spatial practice as experienced in Poplar in East London by Andrew Belfield. And the image here captures a moment of learning through togetherness They also call it Companions Digest, a discursive dinner and celebration of the Climate Companions program that they led, I think back in 2023. Third is my own reflection on urban activism within a divided city, Famagusta, Cyprus, evolving into emancipatory territorial practice. And the photo here shows a bicommunal gathering of urban activists across the division in Cyprus, set against the abandoned Varosha district as the backdrop. And fourth is Maidan research, focusing on park activism in Bucharest, Romania, by Maria Alexandrescu, with an image on the right capturing the formation of collective counter-narratives through the inventorization of trees. All of these 4 narratives are action-based activist PhD research projects that evolved into a long-term relationships with the context. Some of them continuing as spatial practices like Mekana and civic co-learning in Poplar. These practices all emerge from contexts marked by contestation and therefore urgencies deeply embedded in everyday life and manifest in different forms. I think the way that we understand crisis is very important. It may take shape as authoritarian governance, post-conflict division and militarization, capitalist development pressures, post-socialist negotiations of the commons, and cutting across all of them, of course, the intensifying climate crisis. And collectively, these accounts illustrate how embodied praxis not only offers an alternative mode of knowledge production, but also advances spatial practice grounded in care, solidarity, and justice. The diversity of reflections presented in our contribution highlights the potential of collective subjectification, a process that brings multiple histories, experiences, and imaginations into the making of more equitable urban features. And this was also mentioned by the previous presentations, which was really interesting to see, forming the basis of an emancipatory spatial practice. Spatial production through embodied praxis departs from normative architectural approaches, in our opinion, and that's through generating new relational configurations, whether through emergent collectivities, situated epistemologies, or new ways of working together. Future spatial practice can learn from these relational spatial configurations by expanding its understanding of the material and immaterial relations that sustain them. So it may better address, resist, and ultimately prefigure transformative features beyond the conditions of crisis that I just referred to. That's all from me, and thank you for making this online participation possible. I am also delighted that this publication is open access. I look forward to reading the other contributions in the publication and continuing these conversations.
Thank you, Esra, for sharing your research with us. And we will directly go on to the last input. It's also in the chapter Networks, the first article called Entangled Thresholds, Building Multiplicities, Envelops Beyond Human Comfort in the Philippines and Japan. And I think Natalia is joining us. Hi, Natalia.
Hello.
We can hear you.
Share
Super.
My window. And full screen. Okay. You can hear me and see me?
Yes.
Great. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much to the editors and to everyone for joining and for the presentations. It's really exciting to get a taste of what is, we will find in the journal. Hi also to Kadambari, who I know through, from New York and through reproductive justice projects. Today, however, I'll be focusing on a different topic that is of a big interest to the small design research practice that my design partner, Seri Imai, and I do together between New York City and Washington, D.C. And So our topic for the publication was the building envelope. And so in traditional architecture, the building envelope was really there to protect and separate us from the changing exterior environment. But the desire to connect with others and support mutual survival asks spatial practitioners to expand beyond our insulated and isolated building envelopes, whether in a densely populated city or in a rural context. In our essay, we focused on this, the building envelope, the threshold between inside and outside. By allowing nature to spill through our walls, we invite new networks, both the human and multi-species community of plants and animals encountered. By creating a porous envelope, the architects of our case studies put a new emphasis on what our relationships or networks arrive and demonstrate the changing role of the architect. We also examined the environmental potentials of porous envelopes that require expansion of the human comfort zone. The two case studies that you see here are very different. One is urban and in densely populated Tokyo. The other in a rural haven, you could say, in Palawan, Philippines. The Tokyo home is a renovation. The Palawan home is a new build. Both projects serve as models for future spatial practices. The porosity of these homes' envelopes cultivates environmental attunement and human to non-human kinship. The so-called messiness of wildlife entering buildings mandates a psychological shift to broaden our sense of community and care for the natural world, fostering more resilient communities. The urban Tokyo home may be familiar to many people here. It's been written about more so over the years. Named both Holes in the House and Urban Wild Ecology, the house was immediately reimagined by the architects, starting with the envelope. Mio Tsuneyama and Fuminoru Noosake cut holes in the facade and roof and opened the interior with a continuous stairway from street to roof, reconnecting the occupant with the exterior, inviting the breeze and passive cooling in. Cutting holes in the floor slabs and foundation, they also introduced the earthy smell of soil. After a large portion of the front elevation was removed, maybe better seen on this first slide, covered only by a blue tarpaulin, all 4 seasons seeped into the home for a year, dissolving inside and outside. The home's peculiar perforations embody philosopher Emmanuel Kocha's statement of opening holes for the world to fall, slip, or seep into oneself. As Tsuneyama further explains, tinkering with ready-made tools and doing small agriculture in the city, tapping into leftover resources and repurposing what others discard, that is what we understand as ecology and what has been separated from our profession. The new network of this urban home became the elements of nature, light, air, plants, soil, maybe some insects, along with the human community that joined in with the building and nature of this urban laboratory. And now we have Happy Valley House, where the architect daringly and directly connected his family home with the wilderness. A quote from him, "We live here, but the insects, animals, lived here before me. And as they build their homes in our home, I feel happy to share it with them. This is really their space, and we're just trying to coexist with them." For a year before construction, the architect, Justin Guaib, and his wife observed the environment, getting to know the trees, birds, animals, and insects that lived there, along with the sun, wind, and topography. The result is a project that dissolves the envelope, allowing the network of nature, trees, animals, insects, etc., inside. Constructed with almost no walls, with only the bedroom, study, and pantry enclosed, the envelope is just a floor slab and roof that gesture to its thresholds, better seen here. Gaps in the roof allow natural light and ventilation. The open-air bathroom houses a bathtub hand-carved from a river nearby. Locally sourced materials like epil wood support animal and insect life within their home. The use of on-site materials with a minimal envelope allowed for a scaled layering of homes and the species associated with them. The cellular logic of a mud wasp nest is built upon the timber frame logic of the house. A collage of aesthetics results, generating community in a barely present envelope. As the architect's wife, Sarah Strugar, stated, from the wasps who build their little clay homes on the walls, to the sunbirds that hang their nests from the passion fruit vines in the bathroom, to our dogs, our cats, our chickens, everything feels alive. Even the house feels alive. Even the concrete feels alive because of all of the life around it. These two case studies demonstrate that by designing with intentional openings to the outdoors, or to the other, spatial practitioners can change how we live in our buildings and cities. Envelopes become less a boundary and more a site of exchange, adaptable to flux. Porosity then is not a failure of the wall, but an opportunity for these new multi-species networks, ecological and community connection. Thank you.
Thank you also, Natalia, and thank you to all of you participating via Zoom for sticking so with the time. And I think it's really hard to present an article in 4 minutes. And also thank you for your patience. I know it's a bit difficult to listen to Zoom and people in the space, but I think it was very nice to see the insights into the book. As it was already mentioned, you can download the PDF in the first week of December for free. We have also some copies here, and we said we will sell it for half of the price. If someone is interested in, please just come to us and we will make arrangements. But I think now the price is 20 euros. No? 20 euros, yeah. But I think now is the time that we can go into a discussion. The authors are still in Zoom, Karin, and you are still here. So I think I will hand over the mic and we will see.
And we would also be interested in the question, who is doing the work, how we are doing the work, and maybe we also can open up in this question and what are your ideas on changing spatial practices and other forms, because today we showed some ideas, but there are so many more. And
or also if the people from Zoom have questions to our audience, or please also just raise your hands and I will check if someone of you or just start speaking. I think that also will work.
I will break the ice a bit until everybody is thinking. I mean, I don't know, I hope it was the same for you. We haven't seen and met many of the authors, of course, so it was nice to see that we can span a global network of thinkers, writers on issues so dear to us. And I was really, but still now wondering, are we achieving a maintenance of topics that have been in the air so strongly, but are now so threatened? I don't know if you feel the same, in a way that it feels like, are we doing the work of keeping these topics alive within our practice? Is this empowering, or does this feel sad that we are like threatened again? I'm just wondering how it goes, how you feel, because I do think it's important to really create these spaces where we realize there's so many people out there who are working still and believing in this changing spatial practices. Yet, of course, we also know that so many people fear of their jobs and how to deal with the future. So I just wanted to open this up to you, because I'm really in a weird moment at this moment, listening to that and feeling between empowered and yet feeling that we must do much more to actually really sustain such a spirit. Is that similar to your feelings, or any?
I don't know if there's yet anything in Vienna. If not, I would like to say something out of this faraway space. I'm deeply moved listening to all the contributions. And yeah, really, really moved, in fact. When we started the initiative of this journal, it was in the context of a very technical university in Munich, and us convinced that architecture goes far, far beyond what it was considered in the backgrounds that we had access to in these times. And listening to you today, to what architectural practice actually means in bringing together, assembling, combining, connecting, not material so much as we thought in the past of the architectural practice maybe, but very much bringing agents and agency together, is to me, yeah, really the becoming true of something that still in the initiation of this journal, I don't think we all believed in so intensively. And this beginning is not 100 years ago, it's 4 years ago or 5. And I think, to pick up on your question, are we doing the job? I think the beauty in how this job is done is the versatility and diversity of perspectives that comes in, and that there is not the one way of doing it, but that there are the many, many, many ways of doing it, and that there aren't only the distinct ways of doing it, but the ways of doing it together. So, yeah, thank you all very, very much for opening that scope.
Are there any questions, or there can also be thoughts? We also thought about that architecture is always political, and I think that was also a starting point. And there can be many also perspectives on the issues, but what is maybe also our guiding line, or what we also would like you is, in these times of really different struggles and crises, how we can also envision architecture in a more just and really less disruptive way, not only for us but globally. And maybe there are more ideas. One an idea. Yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry, my English is terrible. I cannot express what I want to say. In my impression, I couldn't read the book now. It seems very interesting. It seems very enthusiastic and based on personal relations. For an outsider like me now, and perhaps because there are little questions now, it's at the moment a little on an abstract level. So if I get cynical, I could say 3 hours preparation on the terms and language. I could make a speech using these words, but very abstract. It starts with spatial practices. I would propose, if you continue with things, very much try to present very concrete examples, little examples. If the staircase is 1 meter or only 80 centimeters, so that the woman has to change or disappear. Also, it's very abstract. In a build up a language, and this altogether is too much, of course. Alliances, activist networks, no. So I'm glad that I decided to come here. Information really is not, the atmosphere is wonderful, the persons are wonderful, and I will read the book.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And there was another question in the back, maybe we can also, thank you.
It's like a comment and a question. You were always like, you were asking the question to us, who is doing the work? I think who is doing the work and why are we doing the work? And I come more often than not to the point to pose myself or colleagues or other people the question, how much work are we doing? I feel like it's more often than not how we do it. I think we often do very good work, and sometimes also the right people do the work, or people I think are right for doing the work. But I think we're doing far too much work. I feel like I do too much work, but too much bad work. I mean, yeah. maybe you can comment on that.
You want to?
I think that's a very important question when we talk about work.
There's another question.
I also have a comment and not really a question. I just want to thank you for creating a space of belonging. For me, it is a space of belonging. This is very much now about myself, but I felt I loved to study architecture, and I felt for many, many years lost in my practice, and I needed 15 years to define it for myself. And what you are doing here is like making the path maybe making more visible, and also what is happening and how it's changing, and it can bring even more people who are working in different, who are working differently with architecture to also be that and do that. So because Gabu, you were talking about there's the crisis and people are feared, they have a fear that they're going to lose their jobs, because we also live in these times that are very transformative. But I think what you are creating here all together with this project is allowing also for new things. So it's also a perspective and not only the fear. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes.
If I could just respond to the work question. Thank you for that thought, because I think it's a really important one. You know, how much are we working? And I think the first step there is for architects actually to recognize themselves as workers. I think that's already a question of labor, and perhaps not do the work if you feel like, you know, I don't, you know, obviously everybody's situation is different. And all I would say is that, you know, just the fact that we're talking about architects as workers, you brought that question, I think it's a really important one. If we are doing it, you know, we have the myth of architect because we love our job and therefore we do more, much more than perhaps what we are paid for or what we deserve to be paid for. So I think these are really, really, really critical questions in our field. And in the US context, the Architecture Lobby is one organization that has been thinking about free internships and student internships and how architects value or you know, work in terms of, so I think that's, you know, that's one framework that I think really needs a lot of work in our field if we are just talking about architecture. Yeah, I had another thought. That'll come back to me maybe.
Yeah, and I think it really ties into like activism. I feel like the more I work like in architecture, in my case landscape architecture, but I have to I really compromise my work as an activist. There's weeks, I also start right now also studying, but I really compromise on my capacities to activist work. And I think there really is a way where we have to like say like enough is enough. So there's, we really need to
I think to say
cut back.
To say enough is enough, but maybe also enough of what is enough. And I think maybe this is what I wanted to say with the first sentence in terms of work is not work and working on what. And I think what we were hoping, and it's really interesting because we had these discussions, you know, with this call for papers, what would come as projects. And of course, like speaking about like being very precise in kind of width of doors or so on, we are, of course, or were looking and are still hoping, you know, to say how could activism and architectural work could be linked, no? Because this is, I guess, what a lot of us are dreaming about, to say, could we use the time for both, or like make architecture activism, and not have it as nearly as a split world or life. And I think that's where the question on what we are working on and how senseful is it, or what does it make sense? Because spending hours on something that makes sense doesn't feel like heavy hours, like the other things where it does not make sense, or we're in the bubble of a neoliberal like reproduction of stuff. So only thing that, of course, also we encounter as like calling out is that, or even as teachers or like university, we realize, you know, like becoming critical, very great, but then it's really important that we have the feeling we have to provide also for jobs that can then sustain critical people, or like find not jobs but really networks and conditions that we can continue to do that, and not constantly feeling compromised. So I think that's really where the self-criticality comes in terms of where we need to even get stronger and more powerful. That's why thanks for saying it's a warm place, or it's a welcoming place to say it needs to become bigger, this network even, to really sustain ourselves, to make ourselves happy in what we do. And then think about the door, really coming down to kind of, we can come down to basic questions and make a difference in the business even of architecture, landscape architecture. So, yeah.
There are two hands raised. Esra and Amelie, just, I think you can start speaking. Amel, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, as you want. If you want, that's right. Okay. Yeah, no, I think it's very, very interesting, and it's also the kind of job we're doing. One thing I reflected a lot is for ACAN, for example, a lot of the people that founded ACAN are now working in the public with, one of them is at Westminster, in the, I don't know the name in English, but at the city council, working actively there. So I think there is also many opportunities that we don't really see as activists, and being part of ACAN in Norway, I also have sometimes people telling me I would love to join ACAN, but I'm doing activism in my own work, and when we discuss, it's also about linking all of what everyone is doing and making it, I think, visible. It's also another issue that it feels desperate, because a lot of the work is actually not visibilized, because you cannot both do the work and make it visible. I mean, there is social media and stuff like that, but it's still in bubbles. So I think a lot of things are happening, and I think it's a maintenance of what has been before, that we inscribe ourselves in a longer movement, and it's really great, this publication, because I think it's this kind of stuff we need more of, is really not necessarily to work a lot more, but connect more and make all of this more visible, so it's also inspired next generation, because then they see, oh, it's already possible to be that type of architect, so I can go that way. Yeah.
Yes.
And maybe I can respond to Gabu's point about vulnerability. I do feel vulnerable. I think activist practice is difficult, and activist research in universities is difficult as well. Well, it is mostly an abstract labor that is very difficult to translate both into practice and also into knowledge. It is immaterial labor, as many of you pointed out too. It is not by coincidence that all editors are women, I think. It requires a political stance, making visible and, if possible, disrupting the established status quo or business as usual. And in doing this, as I think Alina pointed out, we remain accountable to others, which is again an additional labor, an additional baggage that comes with activist practice and activist research. And yet we do what we do as we find meaning in these alternative modes of spatial production. But I think, as I am feeling vulnerable as well, I feel like we can extend Tatjana's reference to Outre Lord, and we can ask, are we doing the work in supporting these activist roles for architecture? And can we form alliances as we do activist work? And even how do we extend our work here beyond this publication? How can this publication turn into a new beginning of forming new alliances and networks? I think Bernadette also mentioned that this book is about capturing a moment, and our work continues. It does continue, because this is what we do. This is how we approach spatial practice, and it is important that this becomes only, a moment that really initiates new relations and help us build alliances beyond the publication.
Maybe because Audre Lorde was brought up when she said, are we doing the work? She's saying, I'm a black lesbian poet, no? And this means also these are other forms of work. And maybe in relation to what you said, Amila, it's about making also space for other forms of work we do not call work, no? But activism and standing up for things is also a kind of work. But I think, Lydia, you also wanted to mention something to that.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that it's also okay not to work, or yeah, to state the obvious thing, because not everyone can do architecture, not everyone can do spatial practice, and it's okay if we try within our networks, within our class, within our own value structures and circles, in our way to change the system, because we all have different communities and we are in different structures. So as long as we all try to push from where we stand, I think we are making change. I just wanted to point out that it's not okay if we won't work, because again, Spolka, the organization I'm working at, is also constantly changing rules, because every one of us is from a different class, from different background, and we try to somehow balance this. And we were freaking out that it's not really working after 10 years of struggling to establish the studio and get paid. And then we had an interview with Joss Boyce at Oslo Architecture Triennale, and she said, oh, but it's okay, we also at Matrix Collective always constantly argued about money and time. And that's when I understand that, it's okay, everybody feels like this. So my point is that it's also fine if it doesn't work out.
Maybe also to add on, it's not about or this or that, it's about creating different spatial practices. So building is also a practice, like we really appreciate and stand for also other ways of spatial practices, and it's not about, it's about thinking what impact your practice has. So if we build, if we plan, if we act, if we research, what is the reason and for whom are we doing that, and how can we not only incorporate our standpoint but diverse standpoints, and that architecture has impact on so many, and that's I think one of the reasons why we are discussing this issue and why we started it. And so we really think that we have to think about the resources, specifically resources as land, as build space, and one way that also is in the book, and there are so many, so I really think look at the open access issue, and there is, for example, reusing the existing building structure, but creating environments that incorporate different voices, like co-participation, co-creation, only to name two, or also really specifically regarding the answer of work, again, for example, SAS that joined us today, they specifically agreed all to have, I think it was 10% of their working time for this collective work, so that they work 10% less, and as a collective they have 10% of the time, maybe to give you a specific answer also for that. Yeah, for activism.
I just want to add point, because you talked about this gap between theory and practice. I was working on disability and space for the last time to write about it in my thesis, and I think that's actually a very obvious point where it's very connected. You can theorize about it, and it's important to theorize about it, like what is normal, who are we planning for, why, and these questions. But it also comes like very straight into practice, into building. So I think if you want to be an activist and be practical as well, that's a field which is interesting and still not so like overloaded from people. Yeah, So yeah, I think maybe that's also like a field which could fit into the book and into this discussion. No.
Very nice. I don't know. I mean, we can also go to the bar and have a drink together and have a bit more informal setting. I mean, we are all practitioners, thinkers, activists, or whatever, and I think it would be nice to go on with this discussion, and we would really appreciate if you want to stay with us and if we can chat together what these changing spatial practices might be or could be. So thank you all very much for coming from Berlin, from Kassel, from New York, from Bratislava, online, and thank you all of you for being here, and thank you, Depot, that it's so warm here. Okay. Thank you so much to all of you. It was wonderful. Thank you.
Bye.
Recording stopped.